What is the longest 5 minutes you have ever experienced? I was on placement with a doctor and he told a patient that he might lose his leg due to diabetes. It obviously upset him. But the doctor left to go get something, leaving me in the room with him. He must have been gone for only 2 minutes, but I swear it felt like 20. The guy was quietly sobbing to himself and I had no idea what to do or say. My son was silent when he was born. The doctor gave me a serious look, handed me the scissors to cut the umbilical cord, and then rushed my son to a table on the other side of the room. I moved to the head of the bed to tell my wife what a great job she did. I honestly have no idea how long it took to hear him cry, but those seconds/minutes were the longest year of my life. He turned 20 last month. I recently had a very frightening sleep paralysis. It probably just lasted for a few minutes, but it felt like ages. 6 months ago, anesthesia ended too soon while the surgeon was still stitching up my knee after realigning my patella. There were still 3 stitches to go. I still can't decide what was the worst pain: the tourniquet on the top of my thigh or the stitches. Wife had a seizure during labor. They couldn't find the baby's heartbeat afterwards and rushed to emergency C-section. Everything stabilized, but it was scary, seemed to go on forever. 4 years later, everyone is happy and healthy. I'm a police dispatch officer and I had a 6-year-old girl call in on the emergency number, and the first thing she said was, "There are men here and they are hurting Daddy." The time it took for the first unit to arrive at the scene was the longest minutes in my life. We were lucky we had units nearby. I'm a paramedic. When the patient isn't doing so hot, I can tell you 5 minutes on the way to the hospital lasts a long ass time. I used to be a firefighter. My kid is still in there. He wasn't. He was hiding in the bushes next door. A bit frightened, but completely fine. I think that took a few years off my life. Waiting to see the doctor to find out if I did or did not have breast cancer. When my son was born, I couldn't see him as he stopped breathing, felt like forever. He is turning 1 next month. The time between a guy who was acting weird and kept approaching me while I was mowing my lawn, who then hid and was watching me from my neighbor's lawn, to when the cops arrested him. I went inside to call them via my back door. Front was locked, and he followed me and started knocking and scratching against it. I went from hiding on the ground against my back door so he couldn't see me to locked in my upstairs bathroom with a bat by the end of it all. 5 minutes seems like forever when you're terrified. Probably the last 5 minutes of my dad's life. They'd done all they could for him and all that was left was to make him comfortable. We were all with him and sat around as he faded away. He was only 63 too. That was last August, but it feels like it was yesterday. Terrified. I had been dropped off on the remote coast off the Portland Canal in northern BC, Canada. No dock. No roads out. Spent the day there. A woman working alone. When the boat came back for me later in the afternoon, the tide had gone out. It had turned cold and the wind was up. The shore rocks were covered in wet seaweed and the boat was being buffeted in and out away from the rocks. The only way to get off was to wait for the boat to start getting closer. Run down the slippery slope and have one of the guys on the boat catch me before I slid and fell into the water between the boat and the shore. The minutes were spent getting the nerve up to do it. I finally found myself doing it, and the guy caught me. The crew high-fived, but it took me a while to stop shaking. I was 60 at the time. Not sure if it was 5 minutes, but felt like a literal eternity. Being on the receiving end of a sexual encounter. When I was 5 years old. It's true what they say. With enough pain the brain just shuts off. Hard to explain what that was like. I wasn't so much in and out of consciousness as I was in and out of being aware of what was happening. Was kinda like when you're asleep but wake up only to fall asleep over and over again, so things seem dreamlike and unreal. Then you wake up a bit more and the reality of the situation hits you. But then you just go back to sleep and it repeats. I think it lasted at least 5 minutes. But might have been longer. Or maybe shorter. I honestly can't say. Trying to stay afloat in the ocean while waiting to be rescued. doing CPR on my flatmate. Did it for 8 minutes, until the paramedic arrived. Felt like one hell of a lot longer, and my arms and chest muscles ached for days afterwards. He died. Firstly, happy cake day. Secondly, when my father's heart had stopped beating and we called an ambulance. We had to wait for approximately 7 minutes for it to arrive. And because Noon and my family knew CPR, we had to watch him die in front of our eyes. When my boy was 5, he needed a surgery on his leg. 2 5-minute bursts burned into my brain. When we walked him to the edge of where parents are allowed to go. He kept saying, "Promise it's going to be okay." We did, of course, and watching him walk away with the doctor and look over his shoulder at us. He was so scared and trying to be brave. It was 10 steps that lasted forever. 2. When he came out of surgery and woke. His cast was too tight and he was in tremendous pain. He kept screaming, "I changed my mind. I don't want to do it now. And you promised. You promised it wouldn't hurt." Imagine being unexplainably fierce, looking for something or someone to hurt to protect your son. And at the same time maddeningly heart-wrenched because you broke your promise to your baby. It was this experience that helps me understand the theory of relativity. When my doctor told me my daughter had been in the birth canal for too long and her heartbeat was too low. She had to come out now. I was drugged up and now scared. He ended up having to vacuum her out. No joke. She had a bruise on her head for a week. It only took about 5 minutes, but since he had already said now, every minute was scary and felt like it took an hour. Hearing her cry was the most beautiful thing in my life. Now she is saying "Mama" while swinging her plate around and trying to sign more at the same time. Wanting to puke but instead taking an anti-vomit pill which lasted 1 day. OFC, my stomach was in pain all day and I couldn't eat or drink anything. There were many long 5 minutes. Ridiculously long. Sitting and waiting for my mom to die. She was on a respirator and they took the tube out and we all had to just sit and wait for her to stop breathing. I had recently found out I was pregnant, out of wedlock, and had told her while she was still under. As she was dying, she never took her eyes off me. She had a very specific look of disappointment and that look never left her face. It was the most agonizing few minutes of my life. It didn't help that my whole family sat there and wondered out loud why she was staring only at me. 6 months later they all figured it out. It was closer to an hour rather than 5 minutes. But definitely felt like a lifetime. When I was in undergrad, I had a sort of friend/coworker who I lived in the same dorm with. One night he texted me, asking if I wanted to come hang out for a bit. This wasn't too unusual since we saw each other around the dorm a lot and would stop to hang out for a bit when we did. But him actually messaging me to hang was a little new. And I never felt that we were that close, as we'd pretty much just talk about work and our roommates when we saw each other. But anyway, I wasn't doing anything when he messaged that night, so I was like, yeah sure, cool, why not? Maybe he and some friends are playing video games or something. When I knock on his door, he opens it wearing a tux. Gives me flowers. Gets down on one knee and starts professing his love for me and saying how he knows we're destined to be together and all these life plans he has for us. I'm not an oblivious person, but still had no idea he was even remotely into me, so I was really caught off guard. When I finally snapped out of it and tried to speak/tell him I didn't feel the same way and was sorry, he told me to let him finish, so I just sat there for what felt like days, feeling so inherently uncomfortable and embarrassed. When he finally decided he was done after about an hour of this, I'm not exaggerating, I slowly put the flowers down, told him I was so sorry I didn't feel the same way, and quietly left. That was about 10 years ago now, and to this day I've still never experienced something as long and as uncomfortable as that.